Most pastors lose momentum before the year even begins, and they don't even realize it. And you know why? Because there is one simple habit that they keep repeating. They repeat last year's calendar next year. That's the problem. Today, we're going to talk about why that happens, why it creates pressure instead of progress, and how you can design a ministry year that finally matches your mission. All right. Every pastor knows the pressure of planning next ministry's calendar, the calendar year. I mean, the staff wants it. They want clarity. The church wants it. They want predictability. I mean, volunteers need and want dates. So what's the quickest solution? I mean, it's easy, right? You just pull up last year's calendar or this year's calendar and copy the major events, slide them forward, maybe adjust a few dates, boom, done. And this feels responsible. It certainly feels efficient, and maybe the hardest one, it feels familiar. But here's the problem, right? Familiar is not the same as intentional. And what may even feel responsible may be quietly restricting your mission. Last year's calendar, think about it, reflected last year's opportunities, last year's problems, last year's discipleship needs, last year's outreach plans. It was built for a different moment. And I know you're probably thinking, it was just last year. But how much can change in a year? How much might have changed in a year? You're not the same church you were a year ago. Your church is not in that moment anymore. When you repeat the calendar without rethinking the purpose, you accidentally reinforce the very pressures that you're currently trying to solve. Discipleship that maybe feels stagnant, maybe volunteer engagement that doesn't seem to be going anywhere, or events that are just exhausting you and your team, but they don't seem to be really moving people forward. I mean, think about that workload that just feels heavy, but it doesn't feel fruitful. When you just repeat the calendar, you're just doubling down on those pressures, on those tensions. And you're not stuck because you don't have enough passion for this stuff. I mean, you just feel stuck because your calendar reflects yesterday's strategy. Let's talk for a minute about what intentional leaders do differently around this specific problem. And the first thing they do is they don't begin with dates. Intentional leaders begin with goals. When I sit with pastors, whether it's like in a leadership lab or even in my strategic partnership one-on-one conversations, I always ask one question before we think about planning anything, especially the calendar. What do you want your church to look like 12 months from now? What do you want your church to look like 12 months from now? I love this question so much. In fact, I love it so much. I would suggest you currently pause this conversation and ask that question right now. All right, how many of you paused? All right, I'm sure hardly any of you did, but you need to, whether you pause it now or you go back and do it later. Ask that question. What do I want my church to look like 12 months from today? Most pastors, listen, have never really planned from that perspective, right? Most pastors plan from what they've always done, and I get it, but they haven't planned necessarily where they want to go, where they're trying to go. But intention always begins with the destination, and then we add some direction. So here's how intentional leaders rebuild their year. I'm going to give you a handful of things that you can do, some steps that you can take. Here's the first one. They list their core ministry goals first. Remember we said this, you don't begin with dates, you begin with goals. So you're not, by the way, listing your activities. You're definitely not listing your events from last year. When you think about where you're going, you begin with listing your core ministry goals, okay? Something like deepen discipleship. And you can have more than one, by the way, but deepen discipleship, strengthen volunteer, ownership or culture, improve connection for new people, increase generosity, confidence, develop leaders. Again, there are hundreds of different things that your church may need to work on. Set a goal around a handful of them. Name them, right? Because when you name goals, you're now beginning to name the future. Remember our question, what do we want to look like 12 months from now? Setting goals begins to focus you in that direction. Okay, number two, intentional leaders identify the steps required to reach those goals. Okay, so if the goal just as an example, if the goal is deeper discipleship, what steps do you need to put in place to help people move in that direction? Okay, if the goal is more volunteer ownership, what environments or training rhythms, right, have to exist if that's going to be different in 12 months? If you want to better connect with new guests, what systems need to be installed or strengthened, right? So again, we're thinking steps here. So the second thing you got to do, first, you set the goals. Second thing you have to do is you have to really think about the steps that are going to be required for that goal to be achieved. Okay, number 3. We already mentioned this a little bit, but let me just quickly say it again. Intentional leaders build the calendar around the steps, right? The goals lead to the steps. So now our calendar becomes filled with the programs, the events, the services, all the things, the teaching, all the things that we're going to do. But they are all now steps. They're not just events we've always done. They're not just programs we've always offered. They are steps that are directly connected to a goal, right? Only after we know the goals can these steps kind of become events. Then they get to enter the conversation, right? So an event, by the way, is not valuable just because it's familiar or because we've always done it. It's valuable if it creates movement. That's why I use that word steps so much, right? It's valuable if it creates movement. So everything on the calendar really should answer one critical question. What does this move? What step does this create? And if it doesn't create a step, guess what? You probably shouldn't be doing it. Okay, the fourth thing that you have to do if you want to be an intentional pastor, you have to cut out what no longer serves the mission. And listen. This is hard. I totally get it, okay? Cutting things out that don't work anymore is so hard because it's working for somebody, even if it's just working socially, even if it's just working because they enjoy attending it. I mean, this is hard. And by the way, people love every event that needs to be cut, at least a handful of people. Somebody loves it or it wouldn't be there. But the, quote unquote, people like it, that is not the same as this is shaping discipleship, okay? Just because someone likes it doesn't mean it's moving anything forward in your mission. So sometimes the most spiritual leadership move you can make is subtraction, not addition. Think really hard about that. Okay, fifth thing they do, they communicate the why behind everything that we do. Intentionality begins with why, not what, not even how yet. Why is the question of intentionality. So clarity, and you know this, clarity reduces resistance. And that's what offering a why does. It helps people who feel resistant understand the why behind the what's. So when people understand the purpose behind a plan or whatever it is, they're more apt to support it. And they're more apt to support it even if it's different from what they wanted or what they hoped, right? Intentional leaders understand that. They don't surprise people with any change. They shepherd, they pastor them through it. When you think about it, churches should be the most adept organization when it comes to leading change because we are pastors. We should know how to lead people through challenging conversations, through hard seasons, and that's what change creates. So why is it that we're so bad at it, right? We should be the best in the world at it. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother episode though. So here's what I want you to do this week with those 5 things in mind. Okay, here's what I would love for you to think about doing this week. Instead of just opening last year's calendar, this year, we're wrapping up 2025 right now. Instead of just looking at 2025's calendar and replicating it for next year, do yourself a favor. Open up a blank page. Don't even start with the calendar page. Just get a blank page. Get a blank, a Google Doc out, whatever it is. And write down your top 3, maybe 5, okay, somewhere between 3 and 5 ministry goals for the next 12 months. Remember, discipleship, new guests, there'll be so many different things that you want to improve in your church that has to be true 12 months from today. Write those 3 to 5 things down. Then identify the steps that will help move a person forward in each of those goals. Okay, so what's the first thing what's the first step that we have to do? What's the second thing? What's the third thing? Think about it like a moving sidewalk. This is my favorite illustration. You're going to get somebody on the moving sidewalk and now they're going to start making progress. What are the things that you have to put on that sidewalk so that they can make that kind of progress? Okay, only after you've thought through that should you begin putting things on a calendar. Okay, and that comes last. If you do this, you're going to feel the difference immediately. And guess what? Your team's going to feel the difference. Your volunteers are going to feel the difference. And your church, this is amazing. Your church might not be able to pinpoint the difference, but they are going to feel something is better. Something's going to feel different. And the reason is the calendar is going to be built on intention. And intention is what creates momentum. You know, if you build your calendar based on history, it just creates more pressure. In fact, in some cases, it increases the pressure. So if you want more help designing your next ministry year, listen, just reach out, okay? This is the work I love doing. You know me. I love helping pastors, church leaders be more intentional with their mission. I love helping pastors align strategy and systems and calendar even with the mission that God has entrusted to them. But whether you reach out or not, here's what I'm praying you will do. I pray that you will design more intentionally, that you'll lead more courageously, and you'll build a year that actually moves people somewhere meaningful.